In a small village by the Red Alluvial River, there lived an old man in a shabby wooden house at the end of a narrow dirt path. People called him Ba Do, not because he held any important title, but because he was the only one in the village who still did something strange and chilling, dancing to send souls to the afterlife. He wasn't a medium, he wasn't a sorcerer, just a skinny old man with a slow gait and eyes that always seemed to gaze into some invisible space in the distance. Yet whenever someone in the village passed away, whenever there was a funeral, people would come looking for him. No invitation, no payment, all they needed was for him to nod, put on his red robe with golden trim, beat a slow rhythm on his drum, and begin the dance, and the soul of the departed would be willing to leave. Back in Yin-Yang village, every death had a funeral, and no matter the age or wealth of the deceased, there was always one person who couldn't be missing, Ba Do. People called him the ritual master, but truthfully, he wasn't a shaman and didn't know any spells or incantations. He was simply a dancer for the dead, which, in this village, was called soul-guiding dance. Each time he donned the red robe, tied the small bell at his waist, held the little drum and beat it slowly, even before the sound faded, people already felt a chill. Children cried, elders stood from a distance and lit incense, not because they feared Ba Do, but because they knew the one he danced for had truly left this world. Ba Do's life had been tied to this duty since he was very young. His parents died early, and he was taken in as a disciple by a mountain shaman. All his childhood, he stood behind the rituals, listening to the gongs and rhythms of dances sending the dead away. I remember most the night my mother died. It rained, no one came, not even a piece of white cloth. I stood alone at her bedside, watched her open her eyes. I burned some dried grass by the back of the house, lit incense myself, beat the drum myself. Maybe from that night, I knew I would live to send the dead off, to fulfill this duty. Many years passed, and he never married or learned another trade. He lived in the old wooden house at the edge of the village, always filled with the scent of incense, agar wood, and drums. Every morning, he woke before dawn, drew water from the well to wash his face, then sat and beat the old drum to practice. No one called, he still practiced. No one invited, he still kept the craft. Like a habit, like part of his soul. Everyone in the village believed, when he danced, the soul of the dead could pass on. It was about virtue and spirit, not about magic. One old lady even said, "Wherever he steps, the earth settles. Wherever he steps, the souls follow." But one day, just at the start of rainy season, a child in the neighborhood suddenly died. The family invited Ba Do to dance. Since the child used to play with him, just a kid, they loved him like a grandfather, because he often sat and told them ghost stories, tales of spirits, of rituals and respect. When he arrived, the sunny skies suddenly turned to rain. The moment he beat the first drum, the bell on his waist gave a strange jingle. Everyone swore it sounded like a gong. Every time I dance for a child, my heart aches. They haven't even learned what death is. So I must be gentle. Make them feel like they're entering a dream, not leaving the world. After the dance, he didn't eat the offering meal, didn't stay, just quietly went home. But that night, he had a high fever and babbled deliriously. Neighbors rushed over and heard every word. "You followed me home, huh? You don't want to go? All right, you can follow me, but don't trouble your mom." Okay. Every night after that, people in the neighborhood began hearing the sound of small footsteps running around Ba Do's yard. Some nights at midnight, a neighbor walking by saw a child's shadow flicker in the yard. But upon looking again, the door was locked tight. The drumbeat echoed in the night, short, repeating 3 times, just like during a funeral. Mrs. Nam, who sold sweet soup next door, swore by it. I saw it clearly. That little girl didn't go. She followed him home. She loved him. But the love of the dead, sometimes it's more terrifying than it is tender. Ba Do still lived the same, still lit incense, still wiped the drum, still practiced dancing every morning. But his gaze began to change. Sometimes he would freeze, staring into the backyard, where the old banana trees grew, only to wither, turn green, only to fade. Some said that place was haunted. Some said the child's spirit clung to it. Villagers rarely dared to go near his home. Children no longer gathered to hear his stories. People cared, but were scared, and he didn't blame them. He just said one thing: no one wants to live next to a soul guide. I understand. Sometimes, even I get chills from myself. One early morning, when the mist was thick and the grass still wet, Ba Do walked with a cane to the village temple. Seeing the village chief sweeping the yard, he asked, "Mr. Tu, isn't there still a banana patch in the temple yard? Let me clear that spot. I want to prepare it. Everyone will go eventually, but I fear no one will dance for me. I will dance for myself." The village chief stood frozen, his broom falling to the ground unnoticed. A little girl walking past the temple looked at Ba Do's silhouette, held her mother's hand, and whispered, "Mom, why do I see the red-robed man holding someone's hand, but you don't see it?" The wooden house at the end of Nanjiang village remained as quiet as ever. But the air around it no longer felt the same. Ever since the night Ba Do went to the village temple to ask for land to dance for himself, something had started to change. That morning, villagers saw him silently clearing the banana patch behind the temple. No one dared approach, but everyone watched. An old man, with silver hair and a thin, frail frame, his hands trembling as he dug up roots with a hoe, as if preparing a place to lie down. No one said a word, but deep inside, everyone felt it. Ba Do was preparing to leave this world. Not because of illness, but because he already knew. That afternoon, a boy in the neighborhood named Thang, 8 years old, son of the local convenience store owner, suddenly collapsed in the yard while playing. He often got fevers and was frail, but very sharp. That day, he was playing when he suddenly fell to the ground, convulsed, and passed out. His mother screamed. Neighbors rushed over. He was taken to the local clinic, but the doctor said there was no clear cause, no signs of fever or chills. Yet the boy wouldn't wake up. His eyes remained closed, and his lips moved as if whispering to someone. That evening, Ba Do heard what happened and quietly walked to the gate of Thang's house. No one heard him speak. They only saw him murmuring something, then turning away. That night, Thang suddenly regained consciousness. His eyes opened wide. He looked around. He didn't cry, didn't scream. He just whispered, "Red-robed man, did you bring me back? Why did you leave me halfway?" It was so dark there, so cold. I was scared. His family was stunned. No one understood what the child was talking about. The next day, Thang refused to eat or drink. His eyes were sunken, his hands ice cold, and he kept mumbling strange things. He didn't take anyone all the way. He only took them halfway, then left. So they stayed behind. That sentence spread throughout the village. People began to recall old stories. Times when Ba Do danced but didn't stay to eat. Times when he fell ill and mumbled the names of the departed. An old woman in the neighborhood shared, "I remember a girl who hanged herself in the forest. Ba Do was invited to dance. Right after the dance, he fainted on the spot. When he woke up, he said, she refused to leave. She smiled, but her tears were blood." That night, someone noticed a flickering light inside Ba Do's house. It wasn't electric, it was an oil lamp. Under that dim light, he sat alone, in front of his old wooden drum and a piece of red cloth. On the cloth, he was hand-stitching words with white thread. With each stitch, he sighed. It seemed he was preparing something for himself. At dawn, when the sky hadn't yet fully brightened, a schoolchild walking by turned and glanced into his yard, then bolted home, face pale as a sheet. The child said, "I saw the red-robed man standing in the middle of the yard. And behind him was a woman in white, long hair draped over her shoulders, standing completely still. She smiled at me, but she had no eyes." The village chief heard about it and came to see Ba Do. They sat in the old kitchen, drinking unsweetened tea. Ba Do didn't deny anything, nor did he confirm. He only said, "I'm used to living with them now. Some have followed me for a long time. Some I failed to guide all the way. Now, they won't leave me anymore." The chief let out a long sigh. "I don't know if it's true or not, but if there are any you haven't guided all the way, you must finish what you started." Ba Do stayed silent, his hand tightening around the teacup as if trying to hide a deep fear. Then he looked out the window and softly said, "It's not that I don't want to take them, it's that some refuse to go. Some shouldn't go." That night, for the first time in many years, Ba Do did not sleep. He put on his red dancing robes, lit a large stick of incense, and placed it in the center of the yard. Then he beat the drum. 3 strikes, silence, and then he called out, "Those who haven't made it, those who are lost, those still waiting for me, come out. Tonight, I dance for the last time." No one knows what happened that night, only that by morning, the old drum had split in 2, and the silver bell he always wore lay right at the doorstep. Beside it, a small child's handprint was pressed into the dirt. Since the night Ba Do danced in red robes in the middle of his yard, strange rumors began to circulate throughout Nanjiang village. No one could say for sure they had seen anything with their own eyes. But the story spread from one end of the village to the other, and everyone who heard it felt a chill. An old woman selling cakes asked during the morning market, "Has anyone heard the sound of drumming around dawn lately? It sounds like Ba Do's drum, but he doesn't have the strength to dance anymore." "Does he?" The man selling vegetables next to her nodded. "I heard it, 3 short beats, around 4:30 in the morning. But it's strange, it sounds so close, like it's right next to my ear. When I opened the door, it stopped." At the beginning of the neighborhood lived a 10-year-old girl named Han. She was quiet, smart, and especially sensitive. Her parents said that since she was little, she often sleepwalked, talked in her sleep, and sometimes mentioned names of people who had passed away, people she had never met. That night, the girl was sleeping soundly. But just before dawn, she suddenly sat up. Her eyes were vacant. She stepped out into the yard, stood still, and stared toward Ba Do's house. Her mother woke up, saw her daughter outside, and ran after her to pull her back. But the girl pulled away and whispered softly, "The red-robed man is dancing, but behind him is someone. That person doesn't have a face, just a bald head and a shadow that stretches like smoke." The mother's face turned pale. She didn't dare tell anyone. But after that, Han developed a constant fever. Every midnight, she would scream and shout, repeating, "That person won't leave, that person stands behind him, that person hates him, that person says he has no right to take anyone away." The village chief came to see Ba Do again. This time, the old man was sitting on his porch, legs resting on a bamboo chair, eyes half closed as if dozing. But when his name was called, he opened his eyes instantly, his gaze unusually sharp. The village chief asked, "Have you still been dancing at night? Some people heard drumming. Some say they saw you standing in the yard, though not during the day." Ba Do replied in a calm voice, "I don't dance anymore. My hands tremble now. But someone else is dancing for me. And they're not dancing to guide anyone. They're dancing to keep them here." The village chief frowned, but Ba Do said no more. He simply stood up, went into his house, and brought out an old wooden box. Inside was a piece of white cloth, wrapped around a silver bell with a crack down the side. He placed the bell into the chief's hands. "I once said I would dance for myself. But it seems someone else wants to dance in my place. And I don't know whether they want to take me away or keep me here." That night, a group of young men gathered at the alley for drinks. They drank late into the night, then decided to take a walk toward the far end of the village. As they passed by Ba Do's house, one of them suddenly stopped and pointed toward the yard. "Hey, do you see that? Who's standing behind Ba Do? There's someone standing right up against his back, really tall." but all black, no visible face. The whole group turned and bolted in every direction. The next day, the one who had pointed fell ill, burning with fever, half-conscious, mumbling. It told me not to look. It said I wasn't allowed to see. The following morning, Ba Do went to the village temple and sought out an old woman named Bai Tam, someone who had once learned the soul-guiding dance from him in her youth, but had quit midway because of fear. He said, "I need you to go with me one last time. There's someone who won't leave, but also won't stay. I think it'll take 2 dancers to send it away." Bai Tam was horrified. "I can't. I quit back then because I saw something sitting on the drum. It turned to face me, and its whole face was blood." Ba Do only nodded. "I know, but this time, if I dance alone, I might not return." That night, for the first time in decades, 2 people stood together in red robes in the middle of the temple yard. There was no funeral, no coffin, just a small incense table, 3 cups of water, and a piece of white cloth laid in the center. The drum echoed, slow, then faster, then silence. The bell rang, once, twice, 3 times. No one knew who they were dancing for, but the whole village heard it, and everyone could feel something very heavy had just left this land. The next morning, the mist was thick. Ba Do lay resting in his house, his expression peaceful, a faint smile on his lips. As for Bai Tam, she couldn't bring herself to return home alone. She said, "I saw clearly, someone quietly bowed and followed behind Ba Do. But when they left, they turned to look at me. This time, they had a face, and they were crying." After the night when 2 people danced together in the temple yard, the village of Nanjiang became strangely quiet. No one saw the shadow of the child following Ba Do anymore. No more drum sounds at dawn, and no more strange dreams haunting the children. But it was precisely this silence that made people more afraid. Because in this village, when it gets too quiet, it feels like something is just waiting to happen. Ba Do still lived in his old house at the edge of the village. Every morning, he would go to the well, wash his face, water his wilting plants, then sit and beat the drum to keep his hands in rhythm. But everyone could see, he had grown thinner. His face looked sunken, eyes hollow, his steps slower than before. The elders in the neighborhood would look at him and sigh. He doesn't have much time left. And he probably knows it too. That's why he cleared a patch of land for himself. But still, Ba Do hadn't stopped. Whenever someone passed away in the village, he would once again put on his red robe, slowly walk into the funeral home, as if he were an inseparable part of every final farewell. Until one day, an elder in the village, Mr. Trong, who used to be the village chief and was now over 80, fell seriously ill and became bedridden. His children invited doctors, healers, even held rituals and offerings. But he kept getting weaker. And then, on a chilly late December afternoon, he never woke up again. The funeral was prepared. Everyone discussed inviting Ba Do to perform the dance. As always, but strangely, this time, Mr. Trong's son, Trong Ban Kai, refused. He told the neighbors, "No, we're not inviting Mr. Do. I heard that those he danced for, their souls don't find peace. I don't want my father's spirit wandering." Unable to rest, the rumor spread quickly. Some people disagreed, some agreed, but in the end, the funeral took place without drums, without bells, without the soul-guiding dance that had always been there through the years. Ba Do heard the news and said nothing. He still sent a funeral wreath, still came to light incense, but stood outside under the eaves, never stepping in. On his way back, he told a little boy selling lottery tickets, "No one wants to be guided anymore. That means people have started to fear me. And once they fear, everything I've protected all these years begins to fade." The boy asked, "Then why do you still hold on to your craft, Grandpa?" He didn't answer. He just turned away, gripping the strap of his conical hat tightly, eyes staring far down the dirt road leading out to the fields. 3 days after Mr. Trong's funeral, strange things began happening to the family. In the middle of the night, they heard 3 knocks at the door, even though the gate was locked tight. Dogs in the neighborhood howled toward Mr. Trong's front porch. The housemaid recalled, "That night, I woke up to use the restroom, looked out the window, and saw someone standing at the gate, dressed in white, wearing a mourning cloth on their head. But by then, no one in the house was still in mourning clothes." Mr. Kai didn't believe it. He thought it was grief playing tricks on them. But then he dreamed of his father, standing at the doorstep, his face stern and sorrowful, lips moving but unable to speak, and he began to feel unsettled. One evening, Kai came to find Ba Do. He clasped his hands together and bowed. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. My father has come back, but he can't enter. He just stands at the door, unable to step inside. His body trembles. His lips move but no words come out. I don't know why, but it feels like something's missing, like someone needs to guide him in." Ba Do remained silent by the old tea table. After a while, he sighed. "I'm not angry. Everyone fears things connected to death. Eventually. But we humans, we need someone to send us off. Just like we need someone to guide us through life. Without that, the soul gets lost. And once it's lost, it can't come home." Kai choked up. "I just want you to help my father. Just this once. Even if it's late, please don't let him stay lost forever." The next morning, Ba Do went to Mr. Trong's house. No drums, no music, no more formal funeral. Just a small incense table in the yard, a bowl of cold rice, and a cup of offering wine. He wore his red robe, stepped into the yard, struck the bell 3 times, then began to dance, softly, slowly, each step like drawing an invisible path between 2 realms. Neighbors stood watching. No one dared make a sound. Some put their hands together in prayer. Some bowed their heads and wept. When the dance ended, he simply said, "Now the elder can enter the house." That night, the Trong family no longer heard knocking. The dogs didn't howl. The lights didn't flicker. And for the first time since the funeral, Kai slept deeply, without dreams, without restlessness. As for Ba Do, he quietly returned home and hung his red robe on the wall. In his hands, the white thread that hemmed the robe had come undone at some point. But he didn't stitch it back, because he knew, very soon, there would be no one left who wanted to be guided. The final days of the year in Nanjiang were always chilly. Morning mist cloaked every alley, and the sound of roosters crowing in the distance felt like it came from another world. That year, the cold felt deeper than usual. Even though the village buzzed with preparations for Tet, there was something like a thin layer of fog covering the rooftops, the bamboo groves, and even the eyes of the people. That year, Ba Do didn't hang up lanterns or wrap Tet cakes. In front of his house, only a few pots of succulent flowers stood unopened. When neighbors stopped by to gift him sticky rice cakes, he thanked them, then placed them on the altar, untouched. Villagers whispered among themselves, "He's probably not celebrating Tet. Maybe he knows this will be his last year." One afternoon, a strange little boy appeared at his doorstep. He looked about 10, his head shaved close, holding a tiny paper drum in his hand, tapping it softly and rhythmically. Ba Do sat inside, not looking out, but his hands resting on his knees began to tremble slightly. His eyes stared blankly into the space in front of him. A moment later, he stood up and stepped outside. The boy was gone, but the tiny paper drum was still sitting on the doorstep. He picked it up and stared at it for a long while. Then he murmured, "You came back, huh? Why haven't you moved on?" That night, he couldn't sleep. The sound of the paper drum from the afternoon kept echoing in his mind. He went to the altar, lit an incense stick, and sat watching the flickering flame. In his mind, the face of Luke appeared, a little boy who had died 10 years earlier from a severe fever. His family was poor, they couldn't afford a shaman. Ba Do had been the only one invited. Back then, he was just past 50. Still strong, he danced through the full 3 rounds. then left right after. But that night, he dreamed of the boy standing at his door, holding a paper drum, beating it slowly. "Grandpa, I can't go." Since then, every few months, he would dream of the boy again. And each time, the drum beats sounded closer, clearer. Then, gradually, the dreams stopped. But during Memorial Days, the faint tapping could still be heard in the yard. He had tried to forget. But that year, close to Tet, the paper drum returned, along with the shadow of the boy. He decided to visit Mrs. Luke's aunt from back then. Now over 60, living alone, she still remembered. He died on the second day of Tet. "I remember clearly. Back then we were poor. Couldn't afford anything. Only asked you for help. But you left in a hurry. No one lit incense. No one sprinkled water." Ba Do sat in silence for a while. Then softly said, "Maybe I didn't guide him all the way. He clung to me. He didn't want to go." The next day, he brought a real drum to Luke's grave, placed 3 cups of water, a stick of incense, and a small paper robe. There was no wind, yet the incense leaned to one side. The leaves around the grave rustled lightly. He sat down, played a slow rhythm on the drum, then spoke aloud. "Luke, if you're still here, follow the sound of this drum and go. Don't come back to Grandpa's house. It's too cold there. No one can keep you anymore. Go now. Go in peace." That night, for the first time in many years, he slept deeply. No dreams, no drum beats, no damp chill inside his chest. But around midnight, a gust of wind suddenly rose. The back door swung open. The paper drum sitting on the table rolled to the ground. He woke, walked out to the yard, stood in the darkness, and softly said, "If you're not going, then tell me. What are you afraid of? Or is there someone you miss and haven't met yet?" The wind howled through the roof. A single leaf fell, gliding quietly past his feet. Then, from far off, came a tiny drumbeat, just one, and then silence. The next morning, he wrapped the paper drum and brought it to the patch of land behind the temple, the place he had requested to be buried. He dug a small hole, placed the drum inside, and covered it with earth. No prayers, no words, only his eyes, after so many years, held a glimmer of peace. "Goodbye, son. This time, go all the way. Don't cling to Grandpa anymore. Everyone deserves a place of their own." That night, neighbors walking past saw Ba Do's house dark early. No drum sounds, no incense glow, just a night that was quiet, cold, but no longer heavy. In the village of Nanjiang, behind the old pagoda, there was a small hill the locals called the Orphan's Knoll, Go Mo Koi. No one dared go near it in the late afternoon, because nearly 10 years ago, it had been the place where a young girl named Lu Yen hanged herself. It happened during a rainy season. Lu Yen was the eldest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Le Van Hong, bright, beautiful, kind, but she fell into a doomed romance with a newly graduated schoolteacher. In the end, betrayed and shamed by cruel gossip, she hanged herself right there on the hill, leaving behind a piece of paper with words that trailed off before the sentence could finish. The family was devastated, but the funeral was strangely quiet. Some feared involvement with someone who took their own life. Others whispered, "She died unjustly, her soul can't move on." And so, when the funeral took place, no one invited Ba Do. He simply stood far away, holding his red dancing robe but never putting it on. He knew, when the dead aren't properly sent off, their souls linger. And he was right. Ever since that death, with each return of the rainy season, people reported seeing someone standing beneath the old dipterocarp tree on the hill. When lightning flashed, they saw the flutter of a white dress. The sound of the rain was sometimes laced with someone sighing. Children who had played up there came home saying, "There was a lady with long hair behind me." She asked, "Does anyone miss me this time of year?" That year, on the 10th anniversary of Lu Yen's death, Ba Do unexpectedly appeared at Mrs. Hong's house, Lu Yen's mother. He asked, I heard no one has ever properly performed a sending-off ceremony for her. If possible, I'd like to dance for her once, to help her go in peace." Mrs. Hong teared up. "I used to be afraid. They say you shouldn't call back someone who took their own life. Shouldn't touch them, but for 10 years now, I've heard footsteps on the roof every year. Night after night, someone lights incense in the yard, and it's not anyone from this house. I think she hasn't been able to leave. Please help her, and I'll be forever grateful." That afternoon, Ba Do climbed the hill alone. He brought with him his red robe, a wooden drum, and the silver bell with the chipped rim. No one went with him, but from a distance, villagers watched. He set up a small incense table at the base of the tree. The wind howled, leaves rustled loudly. The sky was heavy gray, threatening rain, but he didn't flinch. He beat the drum, once, then twice, then 3 times, and then he began to dance, not the usual steps, but movements slower, quieter, as if he were tiptoeing between 2 worlds, the living and the dead. With each step he took, leaves fell. The red sleeves of his robe rose gently, then lowered again. No one heard his prayer, but they said that when he raised his arms for the final time, the wind suddenly stopped, the rustling ceased, everything went still, and they heard him whisper, "Luyen, go now. Don't stand there anymore. It's been 10 years, there's no one left at home waiting. Go peacefully. Let your spirit be clean. We weren't born to be left out under the sky like this." That night, Mrs. Hong dreamed of her daughter standing under the eaves. Her face no longer pale like before. She smiled, her eyes light and calm. She said nothing, just placed a small wildflower on the altar, then turned and walked away. Mrs. Hong woke up in tears. The wind outside still blew, but this time, it was a soft breeze. Not cold, not bitter. The next morning, Ba Do sat silently in front of his house for a long while. A neighbor passing by asked, "Is it all quiet now, sir?" He simply nodded. "One soul is at peace. But there are so many more. I'm afraid I won't be in time." That sentence left the neighbor speechless. And in the heart of everyone who heard that story, a quiet question lingered. Are we living without finishing the road we're meant to walk? Are we still bound by a soul we forgot to guide? Near the edge of Nanjiang village, there was a small path that led to an old water dock, once used by villagers to wash clothes, draw water for cooking, and offer to the ancestors. Nowadays, with tap water available, few people went there anymore. But for Ba Do, every time he prepared to dance, he still stopped by the old dock, scooped up a ladle of clear water, and brought it home to place in front of the incense altar. When people asked, he simply said, "Old water, pure heart." The first ladle is to call the soul back, and also, to remind the soul to go. Each time he performed the soul-guiding dance, after finishing, he would take that ladle of water and sprinkle it gently in 3 directions, at the doorstep, the corner of the porch, and behind the house, as if marking a path for the soul to follow. One day, a student named Heen, working on a thesis about folk beliefs, came to visit Ba Do. He asked to follow him for a few days to take notes. At first, Ba Do hesitated, but eventually agreed. On the very first afternoon accompanying him, Heen witnessed Ba Do sitting in front of the ceremonial water for a long time. He didn't do anything, just stared at it. Stared as if talking to someone, as if remembering something. Then, he turned to Heen and said, "This water isn't just ordinary water. Someone used to be inside it." Heen was startled. "What do you mean? Someone in the water?" Ba Do didn't answer directly. He simply told a story. "Long ago, I guided a man who drowned. He died quietly. No one knew. And his body washed ashore on the very day of the kitchen god's departure. His family was poor. No funeral was held. They only asked me to light incense. I danced, sprinkled water as usual, but after that, every time I drew ceremonial water, I heard someone sigh, so faint, like the wind, but very clear. Since then, he began saving the ceremonial ladle after each dance. He didn't pour it away, just left it until the next morning before washing it. And for many years, he never once saw the water in that ladle turn murky. Except for one time, the water suddenly bubbled, as if someone was gently stirring it. A strange earthy smell arose, and the cold from the water climbed up his arm like the chill of someone no longer living. Heen began to pay attention. On the nights he stayed over at Ba Do's house, he often saw the old man sitting in front of the ladle, whispering something. One night, curiosity got the better of him. Heen leaned in and brought his ear close to the ladle, then jumped back in fright, because he clearly heard a voice whispering, "I haven't made it yet. The path is too foggy. Let me stay a little longer." Heen turned pale, ready to speak up, but Ba Do had already stepped beside him, gently patting his shoulder. "You heard it, didn't you? Don't be afraid. It won't harm anyone. It just needs someone to remember." After that, Heen didn't dare sleep at Ba Do's house anymore. But he couldn't rest easy. He decided to research old records, ask around the village, and eventually found the identity of the drowned man from years ago. His name was Don Van Kom. Once a ferry rower across the river, Heen tracked down the man's only surviving grandchild, a young woman named Mai, who now lived in the city and hadn't returned to the village in a long time. When Mai heard the story, she stayed silent for a moment. Then tears welled up in her eyes. "I once heard my grandmother say that Grandpa drowned and no one held a proper offering. We were poor, and it was the end of the year. People were too busy with Tet to care. So it's true, he still hasn't left." 3 days later, Mai returned to the village, carrying a bundle of incense and a bowl of white rice. She came to Ba Do's house, knelt before the altar, then bowed her head and softly said, "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I'm here to bring you home. No more staying in the water. You have a home now. You have a grandchild. Come back, Grandpa." That evening, Ba Do still sprinkled water after the ceremony. But when he lifted the ladle, the water was no longer cold. No more strange smell. Just water, clear and ordinary. He exhaled gently. "At last, someone remembered you. Now you can go. Go warmly." Since that day, the ceremonial water no longer bubbled. No more sighs. It was just water, nothing more. But Ba Do still kept the habit of looking deeply into the water after every dance, as if to make sure the person he sent off had truly walked the entire path. One early spring afternoon, the sun gently peeked through after several days of rain. Ba Do walked slowly along the village paths, where every brick and wooden fence still held the imprint of his footsteps over the decades. But that day, he didn't go to the temple, nor to the familiar old water dock. Instead, he turned down a narrow path covered in vines, a path that led to the old house where he had once lived in his youth. Before moving to the land at the edge of the village, that house had been abandoned for over 30 years. The tin roof was rusted through, the walls were covered in moss, and the wooden door had long since collapsed. But strangely, when he arrived, the door was slightly ajar, as if someone had just entered, then left. He stood in the yard for a long time, his gaze distant, as if trying to recall something, then softly murmured, "It's been a long time. I haven't come back. I know, you're still here." This story began long ago, when Ba Do was still young. Not yet the soul dancer. Just an ordinary man, with someone he loved, a small home, and a simple dream. The girl he loved was named Tho, a village girl. Graceful and gentle. They had set a wedding date, had planned a life together. But then, tragedy struck. Tho drowned one rainy night. Her body was found caught in the river bend behind the temple. No one knew why she went to the river that night. No one knew she had been carrying a tiny life inside her. Ba Do was devastated. He left the village for several years. When he returned, his hair had turned gray, and his eyes carried a deep sorrow. And that was when he began to learn the soul-guiding dance. He once confided to his only close friend in the village, "I couldn't save the one I loved, so for the rest of my life, I want to send others off properly, so that no one gets left behind like she was." People say he never danced at any funeral near the river. Not because he was afraid, but because it hurt. Now, standing in that old house, Ba Do stepped inside. Each step stirred a wave of memories. The furniture had rotted, the old photos were gone, but on the wall, a faint handprint remained. Wind swept through the roof, dropping a few purple zoan petals onto the floor. Their scent, light and familiar, just like it used to be. That night, he slept in the old house. No lights, no mat, just a thin blanket and a single stick of incense. Around midnight, he awoke. The air was still, but from the kitchen came the faint clatter of someone boiling water. He didn't go out, he simply called softly, "Though, if you're still angry, then yell at me. Don't stay silent like this. I fear that silence more than I fear crying." No one replied, but the pot in the kitchen stopped boiling, and a faint wisp of smoke drifted past his face. The next morning, he folded his blanket, locked the door, and left. On the doorstep, someone had placed a single purple zoan flower. Not wilted, not touched by dew. On his way home, he stopped by the water dock, scooped up a ladle of clear water, and sprinkled it gently onto the grass. "I'm sorry I didn't stay that night, but if you're still lingering, then I promise I'll dance for you once, so you can leave the right way." That night, he put on his red robe again, lit the incense himself, beat the drum himself, telling no one. And in the middle of his yard, he began a strange dance. Not following ritual, not following the old steps. Each movement light as a breeze. His arms lifted as if cradling an invisible soul. When it ended, he said nothing. He simply sat down on the ground, looked up at the sky, eyes glistening. "I sent you off, didn't I? Though, you've gone now, so let me live out the rest of my days, without regret." From that night on, Ba Do no longer had nightmares. Nor did he freeze up whenever the zoan trees bloomed. In his heart, perhaps an old soul had finally let go. At the far end of Nanjiang village, near the old stone bridge crossing a small canal, stood a rundown one-story house, once the home of a woman named Mrs. Liu. No husband, no children, no relatives. She lived by collecting recyclables, riding her bicycle around the village each day to gather old cans and scraps of paper. Everyone knew her, but few were truly close. One day, in the middle of the first lunar month, she passed away. A neighbor noticed something was wrong when smoke no longer rose from her kitchen. They called out for her, but no one answered. When they broke open the door, she had already grown cold. No one by her side, no incense burning, no family to claim her body. The local police investigated, but no clear relatives could be found. A report was filed and sent to the district. While awaiting burial, her body was placed in a simple coffin in the middle of the house. Word of her death reached Ba Do. That day was cold, yet he still took his cane and made his way to the old house. He looked around, no altar, no incense, no visitors, just a small electric fan and a few plastic bags she hadn't yet sold. He stood silently for a long while, then said to the district officer, "I don't know if she was close to me or not, but someone who lived quietly should at least leave this world to the sound of drums and bells, so they can rest in peace." The next day, he set up a small altar inside her home. He laid a white cloth over the table, placed a bowl of rice, a glass of water, and 3 incense sticks, then lit the first one, his hand trembling, but steady. No one invited him, no one paid him, but he still wore his red robe, took his wooden drum and silver bell, and began to dance in the silent house. That day's dance was different from all the others, not because of technique, but because of the atmosphere. No crying, no family, just him and a lonely soul. People passing by stopped and watched quietly. A few women lit more incense. One old man left a bunch of green vegetables as an offering from the heart. And for the first time, people saw, a funeral without a single tear could still weigh so heavily on the heart. After finishing the dance, Ba Do bowed deeply 3 times. If you lived in silence, then at least now you are sent off with someone by your side. I don't know who you were, but you were human, and a human being should never leave this world like a nameless shadow. That night, he couldn't sleep. In his mind was the image of that old house, the small table, and the incense bowl still softly smoking. He saw himself sitting beside someone, their face unclear, but he heard the voice clearly. "Thank you. The incense smelled so good today. I truly thought I had been forgotten." The next morning, the coffin was taken to be buried in the corner of the cemetery for the unknown. Ba Do walked with the procession, no invitation. At the grave, he poured 3 ladles of water, then rang the bell softly. Just once. On the way home, he said nothing, just lifted his hand to wipe his eyes. They weren't red, but they were damp. A few days later, people passing by Mrs. Liu's house noticed 3 bright yellow chrysanthemums placed in an old milk can by the door. No one claimed to have left them, but everyone knew it was him. And from that day on, whenever news came that an elderly, poor, or lonely person had passed away, people no longer hesitated. They went to find Ba Do, not for ritual, but because everyone hoped that even if someone lived quietly, when they left, there would still be one person who remembered. On the night of the 29th of Tet in Nanjiang village, red lanterns lit up every corner. The scent of Bon Tet cooking filled the breeze. Children's laughter echoed as they ran through the alleys, and the voices of adults cleaning and preparing offerings to welcome their ancestors rang out across the village. But at the end of the red dirt road, the house of Ba Do was unusually quiet. There was no smoke from the kitchen, no familiar morning drumbeat, just the silhouette of an old man sitting silently in front of a small altar. Carefully folding his red dancing robe and placing it beside the silver bell with the chipped rim. Everyone in the village assumed old Ba had grown weak and turned in early. No one knew that, all through the 29th, he had not eaten. He only drank water and quietly wrote in a small notebook. Those who have been guided. Those who haven't fully returned. Debts still owed. That evening, he called for B2, a villager whom he once took in and raised. 2. If something happens to me tomorrow, don't let strangers handle it. You just walk with me on that last stretch. No need for anyone to cry. Just beat the drum 3 times. Pour 3 ladles of water. Light 3 sticks of incense. That's enough. B2's eyes welled with tears. Don't say that, Grandpa. I'm not ready. I don't know how to dance. I don't know how to guide. Ba Do patted 2's head and smiled gently. You're not sending anyone. You're sending the one who sent souls. The last one. On the 30th night of Tet, the whole village bustled with celebration. Paper firecrackers popped. Laughter echoed everywhere. But right at midnight, at the hour of the rat, those near the village temple heard 3 drumbeats. Not loud, but unmistakably clear. Then the silver bell rang, a short chime. And then, silence. On the first morning of the new year, the villagers didn't see Ba Do like in years past. When they came to his house, they found him lying on his old bamboo bed, eyes closed, hand still holding the notebook of names. On the altar, the red robe had been neatly folded. The silver bell rested in the center of the incense tray. Beside it 3 sticks of incense burned halfway down. There was no grand funeral, but the whole village came. Some brought bundles of vegetables, others bowls of water, some brought old clothes. Each person placed something around the coffin, as a quiet farewell from the people. B2 didn't dance, but when he walked Ba Do to the cemetery behind the temple, he took the drum and struck it 3 times. Then he poured 3 ladles of water, slowly and gently. Grandpa, your soul-guiding days are over now. Go in peace. You owe no one anything anymore. A little child tugged at her mother's hand and whispered, Mom, I saw the red-robed man walking ahead. He turned and smiled at me. That afternoon, light spring rain fell. A few chrysanthemum petals dropped in front of the temple. Those passing by stopped and looked toward the fresh plot of land, where there was a small nameless grave. Only a bowl of incense stuck in the soil, and beside it, a silver bell that no longer rang, but in the hearts of the villagers. From that day on, they understood there would be no more Ba Do. But the sound of the farewell drum might not have truly stopped. That spring in Nanjiang village, the air still buzzed with post-Tet excitement, but in many hearts, there lingered a quiet emptiness, like the echo of a drum that had stopped but still softly resonated. People no longer saw Ba Do. No more silver bell ringing at dawn. His house was now looked after by B2, who swept the dust daily, changed the altar water, but kept everything exactly the same, from the red robe hanging on the wall to the wooden drum lying in the corner. B2 lived more quietly after Ba Do passed, though he worked as a construction laborer, hands covered in dirt all day. Every evening he returned home early, sat before the incense altar, lit 3 sticks, and opened the small notebook Ba Do had left behind. Inside were no instructions, only names, dates of passing, and notes like, "Didn't make it all the way. Wind reversed. Soul still lingers. Child needs moonlight to follow." 2 didn't understand it all, but he believed, if he stayed true, the meanings would slowly reveal themselves. He began adding his own notes, things he heard, things he felt, like vague whispers of the soul. He read every line, remembering each person Ba Do had once mentioned. One evening, coming home late, 2 passed through the evening market. At one corner, he spotted an old woman huddled beneath a tarp. Her face looked familiar. He approached and realized it was Granny Tam, once known for selling incense throughout the village, now evicted from her old lodging. 2 invited her to stay temporarily at Ba Do's house. Her eyes welled with tears. "I thought I'd been forgotten, but the home of the soul guide is the one giving me shelter." He really never left anyone behind. For several nights, the old woman couldn't sleep well. She mumbled constantly. Once, she even called out the name of someone long dead. 2 sat nearby, listening silently, then wrote in the notebook, "Granny Tam, soul unrested, needs a prayer before the old altar." Another evening, the village held a funeral. Old man Chin Fat, the eldest in the village, over 90, with many children and grandchildren, had passed. But during the procession, strong winds blew. The offering candles wouldn't light after 3 tries. The incense tilted. Children cried inexplicably. The family panicked. An elderly aunt murmured, "Maybe someone to guide is missing. Maybe we need Ba Do's drum." Everyone looked around. Then all eyes turned to B2. At first, 2 declined. "I don't know anything. I never learned his dance. I'm afraid, if I do it wrong, it'd be disrespectful." But that night, Chin's family came to Ba Do's house, placed a bundle of incense and a mourning cloth at the door, and bowed 3 times. 2 watched, then quietly stepped inside, put on the red robe, picked up the wooden drum and the silver bell. That night, the whole village gathered to watch. 2 didn't dance. He only struck the drum, slowly, steadily, 3 times. As the last beat echoed, the wind stopped, the candles lit up again. The crying grandchild fell silent. Everyone stood still, holding their breath. Then one of Chin's elderly relatives broke into tears. "He's gone now. I saw him smiling." He nodded and walked away, didn't look back. 2 didn't dance, didn't chant, didn't ask anything of anyone. But from that day on, whenever a death occurred in the village, people began to seek him, and he would simply say, "I'm not a master. I just keep doing something that a good man once left behind." People believed, not because of who 2 was, but because of how he did it, quietly, without fanfare, yet with everything that mattered. One night, 2 dreamed of Ba Do sitting in front of the house, still holding that old notebook. He looked at 2, nodded, and whispered, "Now it's your turn, not to do what I did, but to keep it, so those who come after still remember." Upon waking, Tu lit 3 incense sticks, opened the notebook, and for the first time, wrote a line in his own handwriting. Elder Chin Fat completed the journey. Full moon night, unbound, unlost. He stared at the words, and a strange warmth bloomed in his chest, as if someone had gently placed a hand on his shoulder, and then walked away. Since then, every morning before heading to work, Tu stopped by the water dock, scooped a ladle of clean offering water, and left it there. No one told him to. No one taught him, but he knew, step by step. He was continuing something old, but never truly lost. In Nanjiang, March brought sudden rain. The early season showers weren't heavy, but they lingered, making the village paths muddy, soaking into bamboo roots and thatched roofs. One misty afternoon, there was a quiet funeral in the village. The deceased was Mr. Namen, a man nearly 60, who had lived alone in a small shack by the river. No family, no friends. He survived by fishing, barely speaking to anyone. They discovered his passing when they noticed fish left out all day with no one to collect them. When they arrived, he was already lying still in the shack, hand still clutching the net rope. The village chief filed the paperwork for a simple burial. Like Mrs. Liu before him, Namen belonged to the group known as the Forgotten, lived like grass. Died without a single relative. Word reached B2. He came to the site carrying the old drum and red robe, wrapped neatly in a cloth. By the time he arrived, it was raining. The little shack's roof leaked. A damp, moldy mat lay on the ground. The coffin had been pieced together from flimsy plywood. No incense, no white flowers, no farewell. Tu stood silently for a long time, then asked, "Did anyone ever say his name?" A man from the neighborhood answered, "No, he lived here nearly 10 years. I heard he used to be in prison. Nobody talked to him." Tu said nothing more. He set up a small incense altar, cleaned off the lid of the coffin with clean water, then put on the red robe. The rain fell softly, blending with the wind rustling through the reeds. He began to beat the drum, 3 sets, each with 3 beats. The sound of the drum echoed through the rainy afternoon, not loud, but clear. With each beat, the wind paused briefly, then blew in a new direction. After the 9th beat, a child standing nearby suddenly said, "Mom, I see someone wearing a conical hat standing behind Uncle Tu, but it's raining. And he's completely dry." The mother gripped her child's hand more tightly. But no one left. Everyone stood still, hair and shoulders damp from the rain. After the rite, Tu didn't leave right away. He sat by the riverbank, looking at Nam's old fishing boat tied to the tree. He spoke softly, "I don't know who you were, but if no one cared while you lived, then at least, someone should know when you go. If you ever did wrong, today's drumbeat is to cleanse it. If you ever felt sorrow, today's rain is to wash it. Go in peace now, sir." That night, Tu dreamed he stood in the middle of a vast stretch of water, moonlight shimmering on the surface. In the distance, a man rowed a small boat, turned back to wave at him without speaking. Then his figure slowly disappeared into the mist. The next morning, Tu wrote in his notebook, "Mr. Namen, unbound, unheld, rode toward the light." From that day on, people in the village would sometimes hear soft drumbeats whenever a heavy rain came. No one was hitting the drum. No one was calling. Yet the sound still came, like a reminder that even when the sky cries and the human heart turns cold, there is still a farewell drum that always sounds. One hot afternoon at the start of summer, B2 was sitting in front of Ba Do's house when a strange man came by. He looked to be in his early 50s, skin weathered by the sun, face worn and tired, riding a beat-up motorbike with a plastic bag carrying incense and fruit. He introduced himself as Tam Hua, originally from Nanjiang but having left the village nearly 30 years ago. That day, he had returned to visit the grave of an old acquaintance, His cousin, someone he'd heard had passed away long ago. But when he went to the cemetery behind the temple, there was no tombstone, no record. Tu asked, "What year did your cousin pass away?" Mr. Tam rummaged through his bag and pulled out a slip of paper with the date of death. The 17th of the first lunar month, 6 years ago. Tu fell silent. He opened Ba Do's old notebook. On that day's page, there was one line: unnamed man, guided in silence. Wind reversed, direction turned, drum misaligned in 3 beats. Tu invited Mr. Tam inside, brewed tea, and explained, "I remember that day." Ba came back and said there was a stranger who had drowned in the canal. No one claimed the body, so he was buried temporarily behind the kapok tree. No name, no one asked. That's all Ba wrote down. Mr. Tam gave a pained smile. "A drowning man must have been my brother. Back then he was heartbroken. His wife and kids had left. He sent me a message, and then vanished. I thought he was wandering somewhere. I never imagined." That evening, Tu and Mr. Tam went to the kapok tree by the canal, where unclaimed souls were once buried. There were only a few small mounds of dirt. No headstones, no names, but as they stood there, the wind stilled. The surface of the canal was flat as glass. Tu struck the silver bell once. Immediately, a soft rustle came from the reeds behind them, though no wind had blown. Mr. Tam burst into tears. "He knows I came. He's been waiting for someone to recognize him, so he's not a stranger forever." That night, Tu opened the notebook and amended the old line. Unnamed man, now identified as Nguyen Van Nhan. Claimed, cried for, no longer lost. He thought the matter was settled. But the next night, Tu had a strange dream. He saw himself standing in the courtyard of the temple as a storm rolled in. The drum sounded continuously, but the rhythm was wrong. A man in mourning robes with messy hair approached. His face blurred. "I'm not that man. They guided the wrong soul. Back then, the drowned body wasn't me. I didn't die, but my soul was pulled, because the drum called the wrong name." Tu jolted awake, drenched in sweat. He opened the notebook and reread Ba Do's old note. Wind reversed, direction turned, drum misaligned in 3 beats. He decided to return to the old cemetery the next day. Following the journal's entry, when he lightly dug at the unnamed grave, he found no remains, only a torn shirt and a wooden pendant carved with the initials TH. Tu asked around the village and eventually found someone who confirmed. A man named Tran Hoai had gone missing around the same time. But no one had ever confirmed his death. And, oddly enough, 3 years later, someone had seen him wandering in a dazed state, mentally unwell, unable to recall who he was. Tu was stunned. He understood. Maybe back then, Ba Do had beaten the drum for the wrong person. A soul had been pulled away from a body still alive. Because the drum had called it too soon. The soul had left, but the body hadn't yet died. Tu found Tran Hoai, now living in a small temple in a neighboring district. When they met, Tu looked into his eyes and struck the silver bell once. Hoai's eyes trembled, then welled with tears. "Who called me back? I've been lost for so long." That night, Tu held a simple ritual in the courtyard, wore the red robe, and beat the drum 3 times. But this time, he didn't drum to send a soul away, but to return one that had been mistakenly taken. The bell rang gently. The wind whispered through the eaves. The next morning, Tu wrote in the notebook, "Tran Hoai, soul restored. Called back, not sent. Drum corrected its rhythm. Mistake mended by sincerity." From that day on, Tu added 1 extra drumbeat each month, not to guide, but to remember. Someone, once, had been sent by mistake. The 7th lunar month, the season of lingering rain. The season when wandering souls are remembered. In Nan-Jiang village, people began preparing for the ghost festival. Every household cleaned their ancestral altars, bought extra incense, bananas, and sweet cakes to place in the yard. As for B2, Each day he stopped by Ba Do's grave. He didn't say anything, just poured 3 ladles of water and sat there quietly, watching the silver bell resting still inside its glass case. One day, while cleaning out Ba Do's old house, Tu happened to find a bundle of cloth tucked beneath the bottom drawer. Inside was a yellowed letter and a note. The shaky handwriting of Ba Do stood clearly. Promised to Mr. Feng, promised to send him off, but never did. He left without the farewell. Still see him standing at the end of the porch every full moon. Mr. Feng, the name wasn't unfamiliar. He had once been Ba Do's close friend, living in the neighboring village. Long ago, the two had made a pact: whoever passed away first, the other would perform one last soul-guiding dance. But when Mr. Feng died, Ba Do was gravely ill, unable to stand. The funeral had been rushed, and there was no final dance. Hearing this story, Tu felt a heaviness in his chest. That night, he dreamed of a man in a brown robe, standing by the porch of Ba Do's old house. The man didn't enter, only said one sentence: "He promised me, but the journey wasn't finished. I've waited so long, but he got too weak. Is there someone else now?" The next morning, Tu prepared the red robe, drum, and bell, and went to the neighboring village, where Mr. Feng's grave lay at the edge of the cemetery. He set up a simple incense table, placed 3 bowls of water, lit 3 sticks of incense, and bowed his head. "I'm not the one you were promised, but I stand in place of the one who made that vow. Let me dance once, not to complete a ritual, but to fulfill a promise once made." A sudden gust of wind rose. The red robe fluttered gently. Tu began to step slowly around the grave, not in the traditional dance form, but in a version he recalled and imagined from watching Ba Do long ago. With each circle, he whispered, "The living keep their word. The dead can rest in peace." On the 3rd round, the drum stopped, the bell rang, the wind calmed, a single plumeria petal fell, landing right in his palm. Villagers from afar watched silently, all bowing their heads. One elder placed his hands together and softly said, 30 years, no one's danced here. And now today, someone fulfilled another man's promise. He must be at peace now." That evening, upon returning home, Tu wrote in the notebook, "Mr. Feng, the man with an unfulfilled promise. Today, it has been fulfilled on his behalf. Rest peacefully. No more waiting." Then he added a smaller note. "Some promises don't need the right person, just the right heart." That night, for the first time in many days, Tu dreamed of Ba Do and a man in a brown robe, sitting together beneath the beetle tree in front of the old house. No words were spoken, only the sound of a bell rang once, then faded into the gentle breeze. Nanjiang village had slowly changed. The old dirt roads had been paved with concrete. New power poles stood tall, and street lights cast their glow over every small alley. But the old house at the edge of the village, Ba Do's house, still kept its wooden walls, rusted tin roof, and the incense altar where 3 sticks always released a warm trail of smoke. B2, now a calm, mature young man, was no longer the trembling boy from that first funeral drumbeat years ago. Yet in his eyes, there remained one unchanged thing: a deep sense of gratitude, and a silent vow that, "I'll keep this until the day no one needs it anymore." One day, a film crew from the city came to shoot a short documentary on the soul-guiding tradition in Western funeral rites. They'd heard stories about Ba Do, about the farewell drumbeats, and especially about Tu's journey in carrying on that legacy. They came to ask Tu for permission to film. At first, Tu declined, but one evening, sitting alone in the yard, staring at the empty spot where Ba Do once lit incense, Tu whispered, "If no one remembers, then it'll truly be lost. So let them see it. Just once." The filming took place on a special day, the funeral ceremony for an elderly woman in the village, someone Ba Do once promised to guide when her time came. This time, Tu personally prepared the altar, adjusted the drum chords, and positioned the bell according to the wind. When the first drumbeat echoed, villagers lined both sides of the temple courtyard. Children, elders, even those who once feared this, near the dead craft, stood silently watching. Two danced, not hesitantly anymore. Each step was steady, each beat slow but firm. Sweat soaked through his shirt, but his eyes were clear and bright. An old woman whispered from the side, "Just like Bob back then. But there's something lighter. The burden isn't as heavy anymore." After the shoot, someone asked too if he wanted to grow this practice, to teach it to others. He simply smiled. "I don't teach, and I don't want anyone to follow. I just keep. When no one needs it anymore, I'll put away the drum, the bell. But if one day, someone truly wants it, truly understands, it'll be theirs. They don't have to learn the dance. Just learn how to bow, and how to send someone off with their whole heart." That Vu Lan season, the village held a memorial for the forgotten souls, those who had no family left behind. On the offering table, beside the paper tablets, they placed a small wooden plaque, "Mr. Ba Do, the final soul guide." Beneath it, in tiny handwriting, or perhaps not the final one, on the full moon night of the 7th lunar month, a fine mist fell gently. Two sat in front of the house, tapped the drum 3 soft beats, not to send anyone off, but as a quiet reminder. There was once a man who guided souls. There is someone keeping the flame, and maybe someone else will follow. One day, if you followed this far, thank you for walking through this entire journey, a journey of nameless souls, of promises left unfinished, and of drumbeats that were never taught, yet still found a way to ring. Every view, every comment you leave, is like a stick of incense for those who were once forgotten. Rice Plant, leave your thoughts below. Push pin subscribe if you'd like to join us in telling more human stories that touch the heart. Bellhop bell, and don't forget to turn on the bell, because sometimes what moves us most doesn't come from a scream, but from a drumbeat in the quiet of night.